I know what you want. You only marry for money. Stop talking nonsense. It's obvious, isn't it? You, a poor single mom like you, that's why you're sticking around even after your husband passed away. You're such a bother. Every day, Emma, who's 35 years old like me, throws these mean comments at me. My dad died when I was young, and I grew up with just my mom. She kept working even after she got married again, so we weren't super poor. But we weren't rich either. But my mom was always happy, and she worked hard for me, so I never really felt alone. I planned to work after high school, but my mom had been saving up for my college. I really wanted to go to college, but I didn't want to burden my mom who had worked so hard for me, so I gave up on the idea. When my mom suggested I go to college, I was thrilled. My mom got married at 23 and had me at 25. When I was in high school, my 43-year-old mom, who was still energetic, said, "I'm still young and healthy, Mia. Follow your dreams. It would hurt me more if you gave up because of money." Her words touched me deeply, and I got a part-time job to help with tuition. Because of that, I graduated college without any student loans. After finishing college, I joined a big trading company. I worked really hard every day because I wanted to make life easier for my mom. Within 5 years, I got promoted to administrative assistant and got a raise. I took my mom on trips and bought her the massage chair she wanted. 2 years later, I was chosen to be an executive assistant because of my good work. I started dating Ethan, the president's son, and we eventually got married. When I told my mom, she was so happy she cried tears of joy. But our happiness didn't last long. Just 2 years into our marriage, my husband suddenly passed away. He collapsed at work, clutching his chest, and despite rushing him to the hospital, he couldn't be saved. I had said goodbye to him that morning, never imagining it would be the last time. I was in such shock that I couldn't even speak. Losing a husband was unimaginable, and I couldn't help but think of Benjamin, the president who had lost his only son. He looked so alone and devastated, just like me. Even after getting married, I kept working as the executive assistant, spending a lot of time with the president, who was clearly heartbroken. But amidst the grief, one person didn't seem affected at all: Emma. Living together after my marriage, I quickly noticed her indifferent attitude. Emma wasn't actually related to my husband by blood. His real mom passed away when he was young, and his dad remarried when he started school. One day, Emma made a tasteless joke about inheriting everything if something happened to my husband. I was taken aback and reminded her of the inappropriate timing. Emma denied any ulterior motives, but her words left a bitter taste. It was evident she had her eyes on my husband's wealth, despite her protestations of love and loss. Emma seemed to believe I'd leave immediately after my husband's passing, but I stayed. Benjamin appeared strong at work, but I could see he was overexerting himself. I couldn't fathom handing over our home to someone like Emma. Plus, even though it had only been 2 years, our house held cherished memories of my husband. I wanted to linger in those memories for a while longer. Emotions aren't easily let go. The time I spent with him was precious. He once mentioned that Emma felt more like a roommate than a mother to him. She was frequently out, sometimes not returning until late when Benjamin was away on business. But my husband didn't want to burden Benjamin, who was already busy with work, so he kept his concerns to himself. Surprisingly, Emma acted very differently when Benjamin was around. It was like there were two sides to her personality. When Benjamin left for work, Emma would bid him farewell with a smile. "Take care of Ethan for me," Benjamin would say. Emma would respond warmly, assuring him that Ethan was precious to her too, and that she trusted Benjamin to take care of him. Once Benjamin was gone, Emma's demeanor changed. Her smile faded, and she would make plans to go out with friends or to the movies. When I questioned her plans, she would brush it off, reminding me not to trouble Benjamin unnecessarily, as he was working hard for us. "If you say anything, he'll worry and won't be able to focus on work. Just study quietly at home every day, all right?" "Got it." That became our routine, but Benjamin didn't seem too bothered once he got used to it. In fact, he preferred not being the center of attention. As a child, he saw Emma as more of his dad's wife than his own mother. Benjamin always appreciated Emma's presence when he was young, allowing his dad to focus on work. The company Benjamin now managed was a legacy from his step-grandfather, and he showed a natural talent for running it. Under his leadership, the company flourished, managing 5 businesses with annual revenues in the hundreds of millions. With such responsibilities, Benjamin was always incredibly busy. My husband used to tell me that Benjamin hardly had time to relax at home as a child. Seeing him exhausted from work every day, my husband didn't want to add unnecessary stress. He never mentioned Emma because he felt content and didn't want to bother Benjamin. He was always so relaxed about things. He never seemed like the typical heir to a big company. Did that ever bother you? Nah, not really. As long as she was home, I was fine. It gave Dad peace of mind knowing she was there so he could focus on work. And we never went hungry. There were always snacks. I see. My husband shrugged it off with a laugh, never making a big deal out of it. I admired that about him. They weren't mean to me. They just didn't dote on me. Sure, Emma would throw some snide comments my way from time to time, but I brushed it off as typical mother-in-law banter. She was often out, attending events or hanging out with friends, so we didn't interact much. I wasn't bothered by her sarcasm. If my husband didn't mind, why should I? However, Emma's extravagant spending did bother me a bit given my thrifty nature. But since neither Benjamin nor my husband raised any concerns, I kept my thoughts to myself. After my husband passed away, seeing Emma enjoying shopping and luxury with a carefree attitude made me uneasy. Emma, please try to support Benjamin. Even though he acts fine, he's really lonely. I pleaded. Why should I listen to you? What's your motive? Are you trying to get into our family for inheritance? I've never even thought about that. Well, Ethan's gone, so why don't you leave too? I'm not leaving. Benjamin said I can stay as long as I need to. Emma gave me an irritated look, but didn't say more. She probably felt relieved that she wouldn't have to worry about me inheriting Benjamin's wealth. 3 years after my husband's passing, Emma's irritation towards me grew. Her sarcastic remarks became more frequent and cutting. Whether at home or in the office, I was always by Benjamin's side. Emma seemed to believe I was trying to manipulate him into giving me his fortune. It was painful to be seen that way, and I started to question if staying in a house without my husband was right. I could see Benjamin's struggles at work every day. Maybe it would be better for me to go back to my single mom's house instead of enduring Emma's sarcasm. My mom was turning 60 this year, and it had been 3 years since my dad passed away. I began to contemplate my future. When Benjamin collapsed, he was lucky to survive, but it seemed likely he would need ongoing care even after leaving the hospital. At the company, things didn't immediately fall apart because Benjamin had trained his successors well. However, Emma's attitude changed noticeably. He got what he deserved. He's been so tight-fisted lately. What do you mean tight-fisted? Our credit card limit has been reduced, and our expenses have been cut. Is the company struggling? I don't think so, Emma. It turns out you missed your husband's 3rd anniversary ceremony last year because you were hungover from the previous night's wild outing, as revealed by the credit card bill. It appeared that Benjamin, who rarely intervened in Emma's spending, had finally taken notice. Missing their son's 3rd memorial was a breaking point for him. In his anger, Benjamin decided to restrict Emma's access to money. However, she still received enough for a comfortable life, so there was little reason for complaint. Benjamin himself mentioned concerns about the company's finances. Losing Ethan hit him hard, and things took a turn for the worse. Benjamin said that? Don't act ignorant. You're aware too. How does losing one son justify jeopardizing the company? I genuinely didn't know. And yet he's telling people, despite his condition, I'll rest at home and live a long life. He's been saying the doctors predict he could live to be 100. Well, that's positive news. It's not as positive as you think. If he needs care for that long, it won't be easy. Emma's nostrils flared as she launched into a rant about Benjamin. Hearing her describe him as dull and annoying left a bitter taste in my mouth. After all, who had been funding her luxurious lifestyle? Even if Benjamin's company was struggling, couldn't she at least offer him support? But then Emma said something even more shocking. "I've decided to divorce him." What? Just think about it. The company might be in trouble. What if we end up in debt? It's only sensible to settle the property and leave before we run out of money. Are you really planning to abandon Benjamin when he needs help? I can't handle taking care of a sick old man with no money left. I'm going to take what I can before his will disappears and then leave. Is that your plan? Emma's words, spoken as if she had come up with a brilliant idea, filled me with disgust. However, just a week after that conversation, Benjamin's health took a sudden turn for the worse, and he passed away unexpectedly. He's gone too, just 3 years after my husband passed. Everything felt like it was closing in. Benjamin's voice echoed my husband's. Sometimes talking to him felt like talking to my late husband. Not being able to hear his voice anymore, it's unbearable. Oh dear, he's passed away. What about his assets? His company hasn't collapsed yet. Maybe he died before taking on debt for my sake. This means all remaining assets are mine. You sound pleased despite Benjamin's recent passing. Caught on to that, did you? Too bad for you though. You won't be inheriting anything. I would have preferred Benjamin to be alive over any inheritance. Don't act noble now. You're just putting on a show to impress everyone, aren't you? Even if you asked, there wouldn't be a cent for you. Despite Benjamin's death, all Emma cared about was money. How could she be so heartless? It saddened me even more to think about Benjamin's plight. So, you won't be attending the funeral? What? Are strangers not allowed? Understood. 2 days later, Benjamin's funeral took place quietly, in accordance with his wishes for a simple service without the grandeur of a company event. Afterward, I noticed several missed calls from Emma, but I chose not to return them. Despite her persistent attempts to reach me, I remained silent. Then, unexpectedly, Emma appeared at my workplace one day. "I finally found you? Why haven't you been answering my calls?" she demanded. Emma, what do you need?" I replied cautiously. "Why are you avoiding me? I was told to leave the funeral home. You should have been the one excluded. I called you numerous times that day. What's going on?" she pressed. "Well, you're no longer considered part of my family," I explained. "What?" Emma exclaimed. "You mentioned that strangers weren't allowed at the funeral, so we decided to have a family-only service. And since you're now a stranger to us, I politely requested that you not attend." "You're the one who's the stranger here," Emma retorted. "No, actually, it's you who's the stranger," I clarified. "What do you mean?" Emma questioned. When Benjamin became ill and was expected to be bedridden, Emma served him with divorce papers. She assumed that because Benjamin was hospitalized, he had left this world without finalizing the divorce. However, I had already submitted those divorce papers as Benjamin had requested. Therefore, legally and in reality, Emma is now a stranger to us. In the past, Benjamin confided in me about the company's precarious situation. He feared potential debt and realized they couldn't sustain their current lifestyle. He suggested downsizing to a more modest life for just the two of them. He hoped Emma would support him through this, allowing them to stay together. However, Emma's response was cold and indifferent. "Perhaps it's best to separate before debt becomes a burden," she said. 1 month after this conversation, Benjamin collapsed. Despite waking up, he knew his health was deteriorating. He confided in Emma, explaining that he might have to relinquish control of the company and rely on her for care. As expected, Emma suggested a divorce, likely aiming to secure assets before any debt accumulated. However, Benjamin had already made plans. He had donated most of his personal assets and appointed new leaders for his companies, leaving little for Emma. When he informed her of this, Emma was shocked. "So, I won't receive anything?" "Well, technically, there's not much left." "I did leave a few $100s in savings," Benjamin admitted. "A few $100s. That's hardly anything." Even though Benjamin had informed me of his plans beforehand, hearing it directly from him made me realize the extent of his thoroughness. It was evident that he was determined not to split any property with Emma. Perhaps it was Emma's behavior after her husband's passing that spurred Benjamin to take such decisive action. But what about the house? If I sell it, yes, well, please vacate the premises as soon as possible. I'm staying with Mom for now, but I intend to move back eventually. What are you saying? You're essentially a stranger. You have even fewer rights than I do. As I mentioned before, you're the stranger here, Emma, considering you're already divorced. Besides, the house was originally inherited by Benjamin from his grandfather, so it doesn't count for property division in a divorce. So why do you believe you have the right to reside there? Because when I married Benjamin, we legally adopted each other. What? So you're implying I have a claim to inherit Benjamin's property? It's hard to believe, isn't it? The idea of adoption had originated from Benjamin himself. At the time of our marriage, I hadn't given it much thought. In his eyes, I was becoming his daughter by marrying his son, so I agreed to the arrangement. However, I never disclosed this information after my husband's passing, fearing that Emma would misconstrue it as me being motivated by the family fortune. I have work to attend to. Could you please leave? I've instructed Emma that any communication should go through our lawyers. I've sought guidance from our company's legal advisors. I called security to escort Emma off the premises, making it clear she was not welcome back. Despite her resistance, she left quietly when I threatened to involve the police. She tried to contact me numerous times afterward, but I chose to ignore her completely. Her persistent attempts to claim our fortune only led to a flood of complaints to our lawyer. Our company was thriving, much to Emma's bewilderment. She argued that if it were bankrupt, there would be wealth to divide. However, the company had already been passed on to a successor before Benjamin's passing, rendering it no longer his possession. As a result, there was nothing left for Emma to stake a claim on. Regarding the family's real estate holdings, everything had been settled in the divorce prior to Benjamin's passing. Our lawyer patiently clarified to Emma that she had no claim to any of it. It was evident that Emma had been persistent in her pursuit, much to the lawyer's exasperation. Emma, under the mistaken belief that she was entitled to a portion of the will, had incurred substantial debt on her credit card. Now, she found herself burdened with the task of paying it off, working multiple part-time jobs from dawn till dusk. However, her financial struggles were not my concern. Emma was a decade younger than Benjamin, having married him at 25 and now being 55. With almost 30 years of marriage behind them, Emma was entitled to survivor benefits from the Social Security taxes Benjamin had paid even after their divorce. However, she would only become eligible for these benefits upon reaching 60, which was still 5 years away. Additionally, she needed to have filed for a division of the pension within 2 years of their divorce. I wasn't certain if Emma was aware of these requirements, nor did I feel any obligation to inform her. I harbored no sympathy or responsibility for Emma's welfare. Currently, I reside in the home I once shared with my mother, Benjamin, and my late husband. My days unfold calmly and serenely. There are moments when memories of my husband and Benjamin bring a smile to my face, mingled with tears. Yet, recalling their warm smiles inspires me to embrace each day with joy.
7 years ago, I got married to my husband. His sister already had kids back then. But right from the start, I felt like I wasn't really part of their family. My sister-in-law made it clear that I wasn't their aunt. She even told her kids that I wasn't their aunt. Because of this, I don't feel close to them like I do with my husband's other siblings' kids, who I treat like my own nieces and nephews. I love spending time with them and being a fun aunt. I've done things like painting their rooms and taking them on trips because I like being creative and making them happy. Even though I'm a mom now, I still love doing these things for my nieces and nephews because they're like my family, and I never really had one before. But when it comes to my sister-in-law's kids, I don't do any of that anymore. I've stopped trying to talk to them because my sister-in-law made it clear that she doesn't want me involved. I don't want to cause any drama or trouble by interacting with them since it seems like she doesn't want us to connect. Now, our kids feel jealous and left out because their cousins have cool stuff in their rooms and get to do fun things, while they don't. When my sister-in-law confronted me about it, she blamed me for making her kids feel that way. I told her it was her fault for creating a situation where I couldn't relate to her kids, and now they're the ones suffering because of it. I reminded her that she's reaping what she sowed, and her kids are the ones paying the price for it. Now she's all fired up, saying this and that. It's clear she's not happy, and honestly, I never wanted my kids to see her as their aunt anyway. The rest of the family just shakes their heads at her antics, but I know this tension isn't helping anyone. I do feel bad for her kids though. I can't help but wonder if I've made things worse. She doesn't see me as family to her kids because we're not related by blood or adoption. I don't think I'm in the wrong here, and it's frustrating to see the family dismiss her behavior. If anyone confronted me about it, I'd explain that I've always respected her role as a parent, even when she asked me to step back from being an aunt years ago. It hurt, but I understood and never crossed any boundaries. It's unfortunate that things turned out this way, but I had to respect her wishes. I didn't set these boundaries, I just followed them. When she complained to OP could have responded, "Do I know you?" But I wonder if the sister-in-law was the only daughter among the siblings. Maybe OP being the first woman to marry into the family triggered her. Over time, as the other brothers got married and had kids, she became less aggressive, but the damage was done. The only reason the sister-in-law regrets it now is because OP turned out to be a fantastic aunt to other children, and the sister-in-law's plan backfired. Actions have consequences. You followed her instructions not to get involved. It seems like the rest of the family knows she's difficult too. Everyone here seems to have their faults. You probably aren't telling the whole story about what's going on between you and your sister-in-law. But it's not fair for either of you to involve the kids. And what about your husband? Does he also ignore his niece and nephew? Why is he supporting either of you acting this way? I couldn't disagree more. The sister-in-law made the choice to exclude OP and is now causing conflict because OP respected the boundary she set around her kids. Are you suggesting OP should have ignored that boundary? I understand your concern for her kids. Sadly, they suffer because of their mom's actions. But before you try to change anything, consider how your sister-in-law will react. She might turn any contact into something negative. Keep that in mind as you decide what to do next. This situation happened 2 months ago, but he's still upset about it. I'm a 45-year-old woman. I love my oldest son, but he's almost an adult and acts like one. In our family, everyone takes turns doing chores like cooking, washing dishes, and cleaning common areas on different days. Unfortunately, my son dislikes chores and always tries to avoid them. It's been an ongoing struggle. Washing dishes is particularly troublesome. He fills the dishwasher too much, preventing the detergent from reaching the dishes, leading to them not getting clean. I interrupted him quickly and reminded him that the dishwasher sanitizes dishes. My husband supported me, saying, if he wants dinner, he'll eat from his dishes. He often promised to wash some, but I refused, reminding him that he had the chance to clean them properly the night before. I told him to eat from them as they were or skip dinner. He yelled and threatened to make his own food, but I stood firm. Eventually he gave in, reluctantly selecting the least dirty dishes and eating quietly. I felt bad seeing him so disgusted, but I was tired of the wasted time, water, and detergent. It turned out well. His dishes came out perfectly clean afterward. However, he's still angry, and I do feel guilty now. But I'm tired of his deliberate laziness causing problems for everyone else in the house. Am I wrong? You're not wrong, and I think you handled the situation well. However, I disagree with your statement that he doesn't realize his laziness screws over everyone else in the house. He knows, he just doesn't care. He's old enough to understand the consequences of his actions, and it's time he learns. This should have been addressed sooner. If he doesn't face consequences, he won't change his behavior. Instead, he learned that even when I make a mistake, my parents will have to fix it because they need to eat too. What OP did was smart because he's almost an adult, and it's time to learn how to do things properly. The fact that he suddenly knew how to do the dishes correctly overnight shows that he was capable all along but chose not to do them properly. Well done, OP. I grew up in poverty but worked harder than anyone else to achieve success in my personal, financial, and professional life. My family often had to choose between bus fare and a meal. So when I became financially successful, many people approached me for help. I helped them out of compassion and understanding, knowing how much a small gesture can mean to someone in need. However, many of those I helped started to see me as their personal ATM. I never faced this issue with people who were already financially stable. They would have been embarrassed to ask. While I don't spoil my kids, we do live comfortably in a nice house in a good neighborhood, and I expect them to work hard and excel in school. My eldest son, a teenager, got into trouble for telling a peer that he didn't want to be friends because of his financial situation. A teacher overheard and reacted strongly. Unlike that teacher, I took the time to understand the context and facts before responding. My son then began spending time with Austin. Austin would often lament about not having money to participate in activities, so my son would sometimes cover for him. Like when they went to see Top Gun and Austin couldn't afford a ticket, my son paid for him. However, things got uncomfortable when Austin began to expect my son to foot the bill regularly. The tipping point came when they went to IHOP with friends, and Austin assumed my son would pay for his meal too. While my son only ordered onion rings, Austin indulged in a full meal, dessert, and milkshake. Later, my son vented to their friends about how little money he receives from me, and yet he still has to work as a tutor, only for Austin to take advantage of his generosity. Consequently, their friends distanced themselves from Austin. A few weeks later, in class, Austin wondered why he wasn't being invited to hang out anymore. My son replied, "Because he's tired of covering for him." Austin responded, "But I'm poor." My son sarcastically remarked, "Oh, so you're too poor to be friends with? Maybe I should quit school and get a job like him." This exchange prompted a call from the teacher. I clarified the context of the conversation to the teacher, as she wasn't receptive when my son tried to explain it. She labeled my son as mean and threatened detention. I informed her that I would advise my son not to serve detention for this incident and asked her what she planned to do about it. She ultimately dropped the matter. Edit. It's important to note that Austin isn't in extreme poverty. He has access to resources like last year's iPhone. He has the ability to work like other kids at their school, but chooses not to. You're not in the wrong here. Consider discussing with the head teacher the emotional toll on your son, who has been coerced into giving money repeatedly, and how the last incident bordered on theft. Your son deserves support in standing up to emotional manipulation and bullying, and he has the right to end the friendship. The teacher should have heard the whole story before jumping to conclusions. Everyone involved made mistakes here. While your son's outburst might warrant detention, it's not ideal for you to interfere with a teacher's disciplinary actions unless there's a significant issue with her approach. It might be beneficial to help your son improve how he expresses himself to avoid more serious consequences in the future. I agree, your son has the right to stand up for himself. But the way he expressed it could have been kinder. A more effective approach would have been to say something like, "I don't want to be friends with someone who takes advantage of me," which addresses the real issue without targeting Austin's financial situation. Being overly confrontational with someone who feels entitled might lead to further trouble. Given the circumstances, your son's response wasn't entirely unreasonable. It was a sarcastic retort to someone making excuses for their behavior. The teacher's refusal to listen to the full story and her decision to focus on a poorly worded phrase taken out of context didn't help the situation. I know it might sound odd, but I don't think I'm in the wrong here. I just need some other perspectives on this. My brother, who dropped out of high school, recently got married to his wife, who has similar qualifications, at the young age of 19. I'm 23, just to give some context. The situation is complicated, but basically my brother's mother-in-law pushed them into getting married because she wanted a grandchild as soon as possible. Unfortunately, my own mother went along with it, which I find frustrating. Now my new sister-in-law is expecting, which confirms my suspicions. I know I might seem disrespectful, but I'm not happy about it. We're not well off financially. My dad, who used to be assertive, didn't step in to prevent this situation. Ironically, he persuaded me against attending the college I wanted because of the high tuition fees. To cover the wedding costs, my dad borrowed money from my uncle, his brother, and now he's pressuring me to repay it because my brother and sister-in-law, being young and expecting, can't afford to. They told me they're in too much debt to get a loan from a bank, so it falls on me since I'm debt-free with savings and a job. When they brought this up, I didn't say anything. I just laughed and left. Now they're bombarding me with calls and texts, asking for financial help. But I refuse to budge. It feels like we're living in completely different realities. It's not about culture or anything like that. Am I wrong for refusing to take out a loan for my family? Definitely not. Goodness, What a chaotic situation. If no one can afford to cover the wedding costs, what about the baby? It seems like they'll keep turning to you for loans they won't repay. Stand your ground. This isn't your problem to fix, so don't entertain further discussions about it. If they can't afford a lavish wedding without a substantial loan, maybe they should prioritize their resources for the baby instead. Laughing in their faces was a fitting response to such a ridiculous request. Please ensure that you're the only one with access to your savings. Secure your accounts with updated passwords and avoid staying logged into online banking on shared devices. It's important to take these precautions, especially if your parents have access to personal information like your social security number and employment history. While you might believe they wouldn't take advantage of you, financial strain can drive people to make unexpected decisions. That's right. If they have your social security number, they could potentially open credit in your name, leaving you in a difficult situation. It's a quick process, but you can easily lock your credit by contacting the major reporting agencies, usually 3 of them, either by phone or online. Reversing the lock is simple when you're ready to apply for loans for things like a home, education, or a car. Their financial irresponsibility shouldn't fall on your shoulders. They need to figure out a repayment plan for your uncle on their own. Growing up, I lived with my best friend and his wife, Amanda, on I-35. While Amanda has always been a friend, I've had a closer relationship with her husband. Unfortunately, they moved out of town years ago, only returning for significant family events like funerals or weddings. A few months back, Amanda visited for her sister-in-law's bachelorette party, despite feeling uneasy about it due to her sister-in-law's mistreatment stemming from jealousy or other issues. Wanting to ease her nerves, I offered to pick her up from the airport and take her out for drinks afterward. However, I made a mistake and forgot to add it to my calendar. I had already planned a date for that night and couldn't cancel it, so I arranged for the sister-in-law's best friend to pick up Amanda and take her to the hotel. 2 days later, I met up with Amanda for drinks. She was feeling really down after her mistreatment at the bachelorette party, where everyone else seemed to ignore her. We spent a few hours chatting and drinking, and then I received a text from my girlfriend, asking me to come over to her apartment. I arranged for a mutual friend to join Amanda at the bar and keep her company before leaving. After that night, Amanda stopped communicating with me. She ignored my texts and social media messages for 3 months. Finally, I decided to ask my best friend about what was going on with his wife. He listed a series of complaints Amanda had against me, including forgetting her birthday multiple times despite Facebook reminders, which she doesn't use, and the incident at the bar where I forgot to pick her up from the airport and left her alone. I explained to my friend that I tend to be absent-minded, and they should have been aware of that by now. I also mentioned that Amanda is overly sensitive and holds onto grudges. I reminded him that I had already apologized to her for everything, so I didn't understand why she was still upset. However, my best friend became angry and is now not speaking to me either.